What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Titletown South Florida, the Miami Herald's high school sports show. We have finished up the football regular season, and we're ready to talk some playoffs. I'm Fernandez, Miami Herald's deputy sports editor, joined this week by Jordan McPherson, one of our sports writers at the Herald. David Wilson is traveling back from Chicago from covering the Dolphins game this weekend, so we'll have him back on the show next week to talk a little bit more. But, Jordan, we got a lot to cover in this episode as usual. The regular season wrapped up last week. The last few spots were settled. Some teams got in. The bubble burst on a few others. But we'll look at, some of those games. We'll look at the sudden revival of Western's offense that seems like it was MIA for the last 8 or 9 weeks. Apparently they found it and unleashed it against Plantation. Chaminade, who hadn't really played anybody in the last few weeks, finally got a real opponent in Treasure Coast and still made them look silly. Still had a big blowout win. The Archbishop Carroll revival continues down there. They picked up some more hardware last week, winning their conference. We'll take a look at the Bulldogs. We'll take a look at the Soul Bowl, which unfortunately was cut short. We'll explain the situation of what happened there between Ely and Dillard as they're primed potentially for a rematch in a couple of weeks. But the main event, like we mentioned, it's playoff time in football season. We've got the brackets. I don't have them in hand. We have them all on our computer screens and whatnot, but they were revealed on Sunday. Where all the South Florida teams are going to be in classes 4M through 1M, and we're going to go over all of that. But, Jordan, you excited, man? This is the best time of year for high school football. Now's when it really begins.
Oh, it's definitely the best. I mean, these next 4 or 5 weeks are going to be 4, 5, 6 weeks are going to be a lot of fun. Obviously, that Class 2M where so much talent is just packed together into 2 regions is going to be really good to see how that unfolds. And then to see a few of the other things, obviously Chaminade and 1M, like you said, seeing how they're going to make their run. 3M is going to be a little interesting. Again, they've got the 2 regions there you got Aquinas, you've got Homestead, you've got Dillard and Ely, you've got a lot of good competition there. And then to see what happens in 4M, where you have that cluster of Columbus, Palmetto, Western, you've got a couple of the other teams in there, just Doral. To see how all of this is going to unfold, especially these first couple weeks, to see how things shake up as they set up towards the regional finals and state semis. It's going to be very action-packed next few weeks down here.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, I'm looking forward to just that 2M region, of course. I mean, if you look at it, all year we've been talking about just the cluster, that was created down there with everybody, and I think that's going to be some of the best matchups this week. You're getting a few of the games we've seen already. It's all right, but next week it really is going to ramp up, and you're going to have some even just rematch games, which I think you could have either different results or maybe just the games might just be better because a lot of teams, how it is, they hold back a little bit until playoff time. Now they empty they empty their pockets in terms of like the plays and what they call, and it just means a lot more right now, obviously. So it should be exciting. Let's before we jump into all that, let's take a look at what happened last week. Let's start off in Davie, where that Western High offense finally showed up. I don't know where they found it. I don't know where it was hiding, but boy, did it ever. A 49-22 rout of Plantation. The Colonels hung in there for a little bit, traded some scores, but really Western, just like I said, they look like they finally what they're capable of on paper. What we saw in that first half of the very first game way back in late August. And what it means now for them is it helped them get all the way up to the 2 seed in Region 4M. They're going to face rival Cypress Bay. But I think that the key element, as we agree, is later on, now they can avoid having that matchup potentially, unless Palmetto throws a wrench into things or maybe Doral. But in theory, it could be them and Columbus in the regional final to see who goes to the state semifinal. So I'm sure that's something that Western really wanted. And your guy, Colin Hurst, you interviewed him a bunch of times. Say your guy because you've written about him a lot in the last few years. Near perfect this week, 15 of 16, 243 yards, 2 touchdowns. Here's one to Nelson Walker that put them up 35-14 before halftime.
Get it here, let me
He catches it! Touchdown! 6 points on the board! Wildcats! Right through 2 of them! Amazing!
You could hear that announcer at Western is something else, isn't he? I mean, like,
oh yeah.
I mean, if it's not the speakers are blaring in your ears, but he's got the play-by-play going. But yeah, after that, pretty much it was the running game that took care of business. Chance Washington, we know, has been a pretty good one for them this year. Here's his touchdown run that helped put things away.
He's in the end zone, touchdown, 6 more points on the board, Wildcats.
And then after that, I mean, the defense took care of it. I think pretty much, now we have a brand new Western team. I mean, I don't know if they're good enough. I've seen Columbus too many times. I don't know if they can actually pull that off if it gets to that point. But this at least now puts them in the conversation again.
Yeah, no doubt about it. They needed a game like this against a good team like Plantation. I mean, Colin Hurst's had a good season overall, but when you look at how he's fared against teams that are in the playoffs, look at what he did against St. Thomas Aquinas, 17 of 34, 2 interceptions. American Heritage, 15 of 29, 183, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. The Miramar game where they got shut out, 19 of 35, 207, nothing, and no touchdowns, no interceptions. To be able to have a game where the offense was in control against a team that has a chance to make some moves in the playoffs, it's reassuring for Colin Hurst. It's reassuring for Coach Adam Rakovich. It's reassuring for Western overall, because in order for them to compete against Palmetto, Doral, Columbus, to be able to have a chance against any of them, they're going to need that offense going, and they're going to need Colin Hurst to be able to make plays like that one that we saw, the throw to Nelson Walker, the way he was able to thread it between 2 defenders. In the 3 games I covered, outside of maybe that first half against St. John's Creek in week 1, I hadn't been able to see him make any play like that this season, the few games I've covered. To see him be able to do that and get that sort of confidence going to the playoffs, that's a good start. And also, just with their first round game against Cypress Bay, in the regular season matchup that they won 36-20, Colin completed 23 of 30 passes for 304 yards in that game. So it gives him another game where he could possibly get that confidence built up even more before getting into the brunt of the playoff games.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, anytime you have that experience from before and build on it, and I think they have. And I wonder how much of it too was maybe them. I can't think they would be holding back to the point where they were struggling that much on offense. It can't be just explain that. But I think maybe to a tiny degree, at least maybe, I wonder how much maybe they're some new wrinkles that they might be throwing into their playbook that they're unleashing now that are kind of maybe helping. But I think mainly, like you said, it all clicked for them this past weekend. Can they sustain it now? And it did it against a good team too, because we had seen 50, 60 points against Taravella or Coral Glades or teams like that, teams that aren't in the mix. But to do it against a team with a pulse really, really showed something.
Yeah, no, I would also say that personnel in general probably switched things up and gave Hurst a bit of a challenge this year. Both of his outside receivers from last year were seniors. They both graduated. They moved more towards guys who were in the slots as their primary guys. And Nelson Walker, who caught that touchdown, he was their starting running back last year. So for him to move from running back to X receiver, that took a bit of an adjustment period as well. So if the receivers and the guys who he's working with are getting more comfortable as the season progresses, that's probably been a benefit too down the stretch.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's switch over to 2 other teams in Broward. And that's Dillard and Ely, who were set to play and did play at least part of their Soul Bowl game this weekend. And it was a good one until the third quarter. Ely was up 9-7, but then unfortunately the game was called due to safety concerns. There was a bit of an issue there that we'll explain in a minute. Take a look before we do. Ely, strictly from the football standpoint, looking at it that way, Ely showed they can hang with Dillard. Here's an interception right before halftime that kept the Tigers in front. Unfortunately, shortly after that, 7:49 left in the third quarter, there was a bit of an issue and a bit of a scare. Luckily, though, according to reports, nothing happened in terms of injuries. No one was hurt. The teams and the fans were told to clear the stadium. The school officials from both schools ended up talking to each other and deciding, let's just call this a no contest. And for safety reasons, let's get everybody out of the stadium. So unfortunate, because it was a good game. And I don't know what would have happened, obviously, in the last quarter and a half. But, the turnaround that Ely continues. And these two primed to play each other again if they take care of business this coming weekend to make a pretty good rematch in round 2.
Yeah, no, that regional semi, assuming both of them take care of what they need to do this weekend, it's going to be fun. I mean, I had the chance. I talked with Ely coach Michael Bailey last week before the Soul Bowl just to talk about the turnarounds. Remember, Ely went 1-9 last year, and they were basically blown out just about every game they played. They were outscored 322-63 in their 10 games last year. This year, heading into the Soul Bowl, they outscored everyone 264-70. They've scored more than 20 points in just about every game they played. They beat Deerfield Beach for the first time in, I believe, over a decade. They've found a way to get everything to come together. And the interesting thing is, Michael Bailey wasn't guaranteed to be the coach this year. After they went 1-9, he was told a couple weeks after the season ended he had to reapply for the job. And he said that lit a fire under him. That helped him sort of figure out what needed to be done to make sure everybody was bought in and everyone was committed. And between that and the fact that he basically returned the bulk of his team from last year and they had 2 years of continuity, it's helped them flip the switch. And we'll see what happens when they get to the regional, if they get to the regional semis and they get round 2 with Dillard and get to actually see how that game will unfold from start to finish.
Yeah, I'm excited for that. That's just to tell people kind of like an example of what I was talking about earlier about how round 2 is going to be insane. That's one of the matchups right there that I think is going to be really good. Hopefully this time nothing happens, everybody's safe, and everybody can get through and get this game in. And because everyone, I'm sure, would love to see it and love to see a good one the way it was playing out this past Saturday. Now let's go to a regular on this show, and that is the Chaminade Madonna Lions. We've taken a little bit of a break. We're talking them up every week for like the first 5 episodes of the show. And then their schedule pretty much went completely soft. Not to no fault of their own. It's just their district. They're just so much better than everybody else in it. So it was blowout after blowout. But this game against Treasure Coast, a little more competitive at the beginning, but it was kind of a chance for Chaminade to, again, flex its muscle and kind of show everybody just how far ahead they are of pretty much everyone, not only in the state, maybe in the country. Cedric Bailey, what can you say about that kid? I mean, I know he commands a great arsenal of weapons on that offense, but let's give credit to the kid himself, because if he was relied upon to really throw a lot in a lot of these games, I think he'd rise to the occasion and you'd see him really step up, because the kid's a talent. 6 touchdown passes in this game. The Lions have now won 20 in a row. Some pretty long winning streaks at the top here. They've won 20 in a row. Aquinas has won, I believe, 21 in a row. I think Central 22. Maybe I'm getting that backwards, but 20-plus game winning streaks going into the playoffs for a lot of these teams. So when you look at it, let's take a look at one of those touchdown tosses that Bailey had to a guy named JoJo Trader, who we saw for Central last year at State, making some great plays, transferred over there. This is why this kid, I guarantee you, we talked about fantasy football last week. If we're still playing fantasy football in a few years, this kid may be in one of our lineups. Take a look why. I mean, he got both feet. I mean, it was a little far away on that shot, but he got both feet in. I mean, that's NFL quality in the making right there with this kid, and he can do it on defense too. But like we said before, Bailey wasn't done. 6 TDs for the game. Here's another beauty he threw to Jeremiah Smith. Take a look. It kind of shows you, right? I mean, he can throw the fade route well there in the corner to one, and then, make some nice reads over the middle. I mean, he's just, that offense is just plugged in, and I can't see the march to Tallahassee getting in. I mean, they're going to have one tough one coming up in there, but this team just looks like it's ready to win another title.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And I mean, we mentioned Treasure Coast, they're a playoff team, but also just to put it into context, they're 3-6 this year. All of their wins came in their district. Then their one loss in district play was to Vero Beach, probably one really good team in their region over in 4S in that suburban category over there. But still, it was a really quality win, a good way to set them up for the playoffs. And when you mention all the guys you mentioned, Cedric Bailey with his 2,400 passing yards and 32 touchdowns, Smith and Trader with almost 1,300 yards and 18 touchdowns combined for them. Davion Goss, their running back, 700 yards and 12 touchdowns. all 4 of them are juniors, Jandre. So we're seeing all of this, and they're probably all going to be back for one more year. So while we see this March that Chaminade likely is going to make the state and going to come with very little problem, I mean, we'll see what happens. Cardinal Newman's probably the only trouble they'll have in the region. But
Yes.
outside of that, it's that game and then maybe running into trouble at the state championship game. But seeing this team, probably not even then. Will probably be what comes after that game and seeing what happens if everything goes right. What happens with whatever matchup they get for a potential national, one of the Geico National Bowls or whatever the circumstance is going to be for that. That's probably going to be where we really find out just how good the Chaminade Madonna team is.
This is a voting week. This is election week. Can we vote, please, and or petition or lobby our people in charge to have this Chaminade Central game next year?
Yeah,
because they are both going to be stacked. They're both still going to be in that national title picture next year. It's a shame that it's not happening this season because, like you said, they're going to be in that Geico Bowl series, but they don't tend to put 2 teams from the same city together. I wish they did because this would be a perfect opportunity, and it would be a much better matchup than a lot of scenarios I'm sure they can think of.
Anything that they're going to throw out there, yeah.
Exactly. So, I mean, unless we can somehow this message somehow through the force gets to the people in charge with the Geico Bowl series this year, that'd be awesome. But I mean, if you did it, I think too that if you did it early in the season, it's even better because you know how it is. At the end of the year, guys are probably already not checked out, but there's injuries, things like that. There's a lot of circumstances. If you do this right at the beginning, and I know for a fact Chaminade is already more than likely going to be involved in that Broward Showcase next season. There's buzz that Central may be jumping into it. Maybe they're going to bring down all sorts of heavyweights, even more than they did this season. But let's get that matchup, even if it's like in week 5, whenever. Let's get that game done because that you would pack whatever stadium you put it at. I mean, it'd be tremendous. But going back to that on Class 1M, one of the teams that may end up being in Chaminade's way, and I know they don't want to think about that just yet. They want to actually get to that point and continue the turnaround season. That's the Archbishop Carroll Bulldogs. Clinched their best record in school history at 9-1 this year after a comeback win that surprised me. It was a little more difficult than I thought it would be against Ransom Everglades last week at Tropical Park. They were able to capture the Florida Independent Football Conference Championship, which they're a part of, even though they're part of the state series. It turned out to be a great game, 20-14. Let's take a look. As Ransom, their program, they're independent, but they made some strides this year. Jackson Pegg, their quarterback, was a big reason for that. He ran for 2 touchdowns in this game. Take a look. Here's one. Quick mention on Pegg there. First year playing quarterback ever. I mean, not even an optimist, nothing. Like he learned the position in the past year or so. So he's done a pretty good job. They had a winning season this year. They won one of the divisions in that conference. But Carroll, that old school rugby looking single wing offense, 3 TDs, over 200 yards on the ground once again. Alejandro Isaza, who's been a regular mention for us lately, he had the go-ahead touchdown, and here it is. And apologies there. He disappeared out of view, which is pretty much what all these running backs do when they run that play. They just disappear into the pile. Even the defenders don't know where they are. They don't know who's running the ball. And that's why Carroll's good. That's why Carroll has been able to get to the point that they have. But their defense needed to step up in this game. Kenneth Pembleton, one of our Player of the Week nominees, had 2 interceptions. He didn't make the play on this play, but one of his teammates did. Here's what Ransom had gotten down in the red zone with 1 second remaining, had a chance to win it. And here's Carroll's defense making the stop. And congratulations to the Bulldogs. I mean, this is a team, Jordan, that I think the program didn't really shut down, but it was to the point where it was like non-existent, basically. And George Zagalis, the coach who came back after all these years, and had led them to the state semifinals back in 07, a regional final back in 08. Only Gulliver was stopping them back then. He's got them going again. I mean, it's still a small team, 25, 30 kids more or less, that roll with this old school offense, but it's a building block that I think they're going to have maybe in the next couple of years. They open next week. We're going to talk more about the Class 1M picture next week because all those teams have a bye this week, Chaminade included. They open against Palmer Trinity in the first round. The opposite side of the bracket is True North Academy and Westminster Christian. So that quadrant right there, the Carroll's definitely the favorite. Let's see what Coach Zagales had to say about his team.
Coach, it's championship. You've started a process of rebuilding this program. What does this mean to you to have something already to give the kids, to show the kids, it can be done?
We won the district here a few weeks ago. Now we won this championship. This means a lot to us. We also clinched the best record in school history today with a 9-1 record. I'm so proud of the boys. They work so hard. They're great men. What they do on the field is the only reason it happens is because of who they are and the way they conduct themselves and the way they work. This is just a byproduct of everything that they do. The long hours in the weight room, the hard work in the classroom, the way they conduct themselves, and this is the result.
Yeah, that offense you run, it wears teams down. It's old school.
Yeah, it's what we do. It's who we are. We embrace it. Yeah. We love it. We're not ashamed of it. Yeah. And I'm just proud that the boys bought into it and they executed perfectly. Yeah, about that though, because it takes a lot of discipline to run that offense and to do it properly, so it's executed properly. Yeah. The boys have been through so much. The execution in the offense is a credit to them and the way they can. We went through so much adversity early in the season. We lost our quarterback, Ryan Castro, who was through midseason probably going to be the MVP of the conference, no doubt about it. And then maybe even the district, he had an 82% completion ratio, 6 touchdowns rushing, almost 400 yards rushing, having a great year, and we lost him. At that point, with a leader like that going down, it could have been very easy for these guys to crumble. But Ryan got his surgery. He's back on our sideline. He helps us call the plays, and the boys just picked up the slack. Georgine Sanchez, credit to him. He plays both ways, plays middle linebacker and quarterback for us, and he's done an outstanding job. We haven't lost a game with him behind him. Yeah. So it's a credit to the boys and who they are.
Yeah, you threw the one pass and made it count.
Yeah, the one pass and we hit it, thank God, and he's done a great job. I'm so proud of him.
Yeah, Coach, an opportunity now the next few weeks too in the playoffs. So tell us a little bit about that, going forward for this program.
So we talked to them in January when we started waiting on January 5th. We talked to them about we wanted to be playing into December. And the only way we could do that is to work hard in January and the off season. And they did it. So now this is what we've been training for. So God willing, we have a good performance in a couple of weeks. I don't know who we play, but it doesn't really matter to us. We just want to play football.
There you have it. The Archbishop Carroll, big turnaround. One of the turnarounds of this season, just like Blanche Ely and other teams that have done really well, going from basically the pits to now being playoff teams and contenders. And on that note, this is where we wanted to jump. Jordan and I wanted to kind of jump in right away and give you a class by class sort of revised state title picks, but also some analysis and kind of tell you where everybody's going to play this week. If you haven't seen it, we did a story about yesterday. It's on MiamiHerald.com with all the pairings. The times and the sites have since come out for most of these games. They're still finalizing a few of them. But let's jump into the region of death right away, Jordan. Let's not beat around the bush here. And region 4-2M, that's the one right there where we have Central, Northwestern, Booker T, Norland, Gulliver, you name it. They're all in this thing. And really, that you look at the way that it all broke down. These first round matchups here, you've got Central as the top seed hosting St. Brendan, which looks like a bit of a mismatch, obviously. For St. Brendan. Congrats. Another turnaround team, the Sabres. Let's give it up for them getting their first district title. But the monster is coming. In a few days, and we know pretty much what's going to happen there. And they're going to pair up. What's interesting is the 4-5 matchup. Northwestern ended up slipping into that in the last couple of weeks and stayed there. And now they're going to face a Gulliver team that kind of struggled toward the finish line. They didn't look that good against South Miami. They got blown out by that Cardinal Newman team you mentioned. Now they face the Bulls, which could create the Central Northwestern rematch, which I know the Bulls are anxious to have because they're going to have, barring anything happening in the next week or so, they're going to have Teron Dickens, their quarterback, back. And they feel confident that it's going to go different this time around. I don't know if it'll change the result, but I do think it'll be a much better game than a 42-7 blowout. And on the other end of the bracket, two more teams that have really amped it up this season, and Booker T and Norland potentially colliding. Booker T has the neighborhood rivalry game, well, not neighborhood, but a traditional rivalry game against Carroll City this week in the first round. Carroll City under Dorian James has done a good job to really get the Chiefs back to respectability. Done a great job there. And Norland in the first round taking on and I lost my team.
Norland to Jackson.
It's taking on Jackson. How could I forget the Generals? Because the Generals under John Harris, that was one of the teams when we were talking about bubbles bursting and for some teams and teams kind of surging into the playoffs. Jackson wasn't in 2 weeks ago. They were on the outside looking in, and their finish to go 7-3 vaulted them ahead of a couple of teams, especially with St. Brendan, because St. Brendan was kind of like that. Someone had to jump them because they were locked in on that 8th seed. So credit to the Generals for getting in the playoffs. We'll see what happens. But overall, when you look at this region, Jordan, I mean, that Central Northwestern game still to me, I mean, not to discount Booker T. Booker T will still have a say in this, but that's going to be key.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Especially, like you said, when Central and Northwestern played earlier this year, it was 42-7, but Northwestern was banged up. They were without Teron Dickens. Running back was out too, correct? Am I correct on that?
Yes, right? They were missing Jamari Ford and still are. I know he was suspended, and he was hurt first, and then he drew a penalty, got ejected from a game. So not sure if I haven't seen him. I don't know if his status there. Adam Moore, though, I know their big wide receiver, was also hurt, and then he's been back. He came back at the same time that Dickens did, so that's been a huge boost. But yeah. So basically, with the Bulls at closer to full strength compared to the regular season matchup back in early October, I feel like that should make it a lot more competitive. And also, you've seen that Central isn't necessarily completely invincible. We saw how close Columbus got to upsetting them a couple weeks after that Northwestern game. So there are ways to get to Central. Whether or not it can happen is still to be determined. I feel like it's going to take a perfect game from whoever Central faces throughout this playoff run to knock off the Rockets. But Northwestern, I think, will definitely be the first team to have a very good crack at it. And then on the other end of the bracket, whoever moves on from Central Northwestern, assuming that's the matchup, again, see who comes out from the bottom half of that bracket. See Booker T, they can make a run as they've done under Ice Harrison his first year back. To see Norland's turnaround, to see how all that plays out in the postseason, even if we know where their season's probably going to end, it's still great to see just how far these teams are able to go as they continue these breakout seasons. Yeah, and we saw that game earlier too between Booker T and Norland. If it ends up also happening in round 2, and Booker T handled Norland pretty well, but in the first half, it was 27-2 at one point in that game. And I still say if Norland had come out and run the football early in that game, it might have made a difference because the second half was a lot more even. And that's when Javin Simpkins and was able to pace that offense and do a better job of getting some traction there. I mean, that game could be great in terms of who comes out on top. To me, Northwestern is still the biggest threat to Central because of Teron Dickens, because they can balance that running game with a good quarterback. If Norland can do something like that, if they were to get that far, maybe they have a shot at it. Booker T is the one that also, let's not forget, in the fourth quarter, that was a one-score game against Central, so they had a shot at it as well. The thing with them, though, is I know they can run the football. They're very good at it. Antoine Smith, Gerald Modest, all those guys. Their defense is solid with Xavier Irvin back there and the big guys up front, and Jamori Flagg and the rest, but they need their passing game has to be there. And that's one thing that I think in some games here and there, their passing game hasn't been clicking very well. They haven't relied on it too much. But I think in that type of a game, that's where they're going to need to do that. And whoever it is cannot turn the ball over. I mean, you have to have a zero turnover game, and your special teams have to also play really well to not give up a big kick return the way some have against the Rockets with Corey Washington, who's electric back there returning kicks. I mean, him or Lamar Seymour. It's just so many weapons. I mean, I personally, I just don't, looking ahead, I just don't see anyone but Central not only coming out of this region, but probably winning the entire class. But it is going to be interesting to see if they do get the Bulls in round 2, and then if they do get whoever it is, either the Vikings or Booker T in round 3. Those are going to be much better games. But let's skip one step here up to region 3, which I think we pretty much know who are the two kings of this one. And really, Heritage would claim that they are the lone king because after the performance they had, although it wasn't a blowout, but they did dominate Gibbons pretty well in that first game, especially on the offensive side, made some plays. Can Gibbons turn it around the second time? It's going to probably, if they do, looking at the way the seeds broke, they would face each other in the regional final. This time the game would be at American Heritage instead of Gibbons where it was last time. Gibbons' defense is great. We've seen them play extremely well. I mean, going all the way back to the DeMatha game at the beginning. DeMatha, since that game, has been pretty phenomenal on offense, and Gibbons' defense held them to 6 points. So we know on that side of the ball how good they are. But on the offensive side, can Dylan Rizek and those guys, can they run the football? And can they finish? Because they did actually get a lot of yards in that game, but something always kept going wrong in the red zone. They get down to the 1 yard line, throw a pick, have a penalty, get sacked, you name it. Brandon Innes with that big pick six we've shown a couple of times on the show before. I mean, can Gibbons actually get enough offense, I guess, is the question going into that.
Yeah, and I think the answer to that is sort of saying they weren't able to finish. That's also a big credit to what you're seeing over at American Heritage, where, again, we talk a lot about their guys, about Mark Fletcher, about Brandon Innes, about what they're able to do. But, again, their defense is held pat most of the season. I mean, you look at what they did, the 2 points against Gibbons. They gave up only 18 against Western. They shut out Stranahan, gave up 17. Yeah, they've given up, I think it's 37 points over their last 5 games of the season heading into the playoffs. You see how talented they are out there, and then their offense is able to do so much that it's basically the defense doesn't necessarily have to shut you out. They just have to do enough to limit the damage. And Heritage is just, you look at two teams comparatively, Heritage looks leaps and bounds. I shouldn't say leaps and bounds, but they definitely look like the better team than Cardinal Gibbons. But I thought that back in 2019 when Gibbons ended up beating them without their starting quarterback who tore his ACL the week earlier and then rolled their way to their first state title. So we've seen Gibbons in this spot before where they're the underdog to Heritage and they're able to overcome everything and make the deep run. Can they do it again? I don't know. I don't think so, but I wouldn't put it against them finding a way when their back's against the wall to make a play or two needed. With that said, I'm still going with Heritage to take the region, and with that potentially set up, because remember, in the state, once you get to the Final Four, everything you get reseeded based off your state rankings. So with that, Central would be 1 and Heritage would be 2, which means we could potentially get our Dade-Broward matchup in the state championship.
Right, which has never happened. There's never been a Dade-Broward final after we looked that up. And I mean, we have the possibility of 2 of those potentially this year, which we'll get to in a minute when we get to the 3M conversation. But yeah, those 2 top 10 national teams by that point, I believe, or if they already are, I'm not sure. Heritage, I think, is just on the cusp of the top 10.
I think Heritage was 12
rankings.
last. I think Heritage was 12 last I saw, but it may have been updated since then.
And they may move up. I mean, as the playoffs go, I mean, we're talking 5 more weeks where they're going to get quality victories along the way. But yeah, whoever. I mean, I think if it comes down to it, Gibbons just. I think they need to run the football too. You got to keep Heritage's offense off the field. You got to keep Mark Fletcher on the sideline as much as possible. Innes, all of them, and to even have a chance. But I'm with you. In the preseason, I think we both did, and I'm sticking to that Central Heritage pick as the final, with the Rockets potentially being the team that comes out on top. One quick note: we had mentioned the schedule in 2M. On Saturday will be the game between Northwestern and Gulliver. As of right now, from what we understand. As part of a doubleheader at Travis Powell. They will be playing at 6 o'clock at Travis Powell Stadium. Jackson Norland will play at 3:30 on Friday in a doubleheader with the Central St. Brendan game following at 7:30. All those games at the Mecca at Travis Powell. The early game on Saturday is in Region 4 3M, which we'll get to. Homestead playing North Miami. One of those bracket scheduling quirks where North Miami is the host, even though they're the 8th seed. But we'll jump into that. First, we wanted to jump in to Region 3M, which that's the big one there with the 2 teams we talked about earlier, with Dillard and Ely vying for supremacy in the 2-3 seeds. And, of course, St. Thomas Aquinas, the team that we have to start talking about a lot more because they are still the odds-on favorite to win that class, and they're still top 5 in the country for a reason with their size up front on both sides, the skill players that they have. Ezekiel Harris with a great season at quarterback, Jordan Lyle, Jamari Sands running the football. I don't know if anyone can stop the Aquinas train. I think I think there's a couple of contenders in there that could make it interesting, but they just seem like they have too much depth as usual.
I agree, but the one thing I will say is I'm glad, at least with the way the bracket is laid out, that it doesn't look like it's going to necessarily be Aquinas steamrolling their entire way through. I mean, even their first game, I still think they're going to be Coconut Creek, the 8 seed for that in round 1. But I think Creek, at least with their defense, will be able to make it somewhat competitive in week 1. And then moving on from there, it's Atlantic, the winner of Delray Atlantic and Plantation. And then the other half of that bracket is the potential Dillard-Ely winner in the semis. So they're going to get looking like three quality games throughout the region. And then obviously what happens when they get to state semis and the state final, assuming all goes the way that it looks like it would go on paper. But again, at least I'm excited to be able to see the competitive matches early on for Aquinas and not have to just be worrying about once they get to state what's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're still way too deep and talented. It'll still be kind of a lopsided game, but to Creek's credit, like you said, their defense is solid. They've shown it. I mean, they shut down Western in a loss earlier this year. It went to overtime, ended up losing 10-3. And they've had a quality schedule. They've played Ely. They've played a bunch of teams that have prepared them for this. But yeah, I think Aquinas is too much. If you look at the region as a whole, the winner of the Aquinas game will then play, like you said, Plantation at Delray Atlantic. All those games are on Friday night. Ely hosting Palm Beach Gardens Dwyer at 7:30 as of right now. Dillard hosting Fort Lauderdale. Congratulations to the Flying L's. They got in the playoffs. They've done a good job getting back to respectability themselves. That's the other matchup.
Dunbar's done a great job the last 4 years or so since he's been there to get this program back up.
Yeah, and they don't shy away either because they took on Aquinas and a bunch of teams this year that really prepared them for this. In 2M, Heritage hosting Inlet Grove, Givens hosting Pinecrest, and Calvary Christian, another team we didn't mention in there, 8-2, I'm sorry, this season. They're hosting St. Andrews in that region, so congrats to the Eagles for getting in. But when you look at 3-3M, I think Aquinas is still king. Now, 4-3M, this is where it's interesting because Homestead, like we mentioned before, playing Saturday at 2 o'clock at Traz against North Miami. They actually have to go on the road because they did not win their district, but still looks like the strongest team out of this group. Although, team you saw, Jordan, a couple weeks ago, Miramar comes in as the number 2 seed. And that defense, speaking of defense, I don't know if any defense is playing as well as Miramar's defense is these days. I mean, they're giving up, I think they haven't even given up 20 points total in the last 6 or 7 weeks. And at first we thought we kind of called them out, said, look at the competition. But after what they did to Western, I mean, this seems like it's a legit chance for them to really make a push here. They're the 2 seed, followed by Southridge, who won that district against Homestead. They're the 3 seed. And I mean, those 3 right there, I think, especially the Homestead Miramar potential. Miramar Southridge, if that happens in the second round, would be an interesting matchup too. But you saw them up close. What do you think of the Patriots? What they've done?
Yeah, I mean, what Miramar has been able to do this year, it's incredible. I mean, they lost week 2, 35-7 to Dillard. After that, gave up 0 points to Flanagan, 0 points to Coral Glades, 0 to Pines Charter, 7 to American, 0 to Western, 6 to Everglades, 7 to South Broward. 20 points total since that week 2 loss. Ran the table since then. Their offense is averaging close to about 40 points a game at this point. Their quarterback, Kyle Alexander, he had a great game in the one game I saw against Western. 16 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, clean 60% of his passes. Nate Henry, the running back, he was an absolute bruising back, and he's trying to finish his senior season off strong. And that defense, like you mentioned, they have a couple guys with double-digit tackles for losses. They have one guy, I'm trying to remember his name, the last name was Rigby. Trey Rigby, 5 interceptions on the year. They're a complete defense that's able to get you on the pass rush, they're able to get you in coverage. They know where they need to be. And even when they have their lapses in terms of what the coverage call is supposed to be, it still feels like they're athletic enough to make up for it and make the plays when they're trying to maneuver around some things. So Miramar, they've got some dark horse potential here. I mean, like you said, their first game's against Pines Charter. I'll be interested to see how the game against Southridge goes, assuming both of them make it to the semis. And whoever wins that Homestead versus Miramar or Southridge would be an incredible regional final to see.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I saw Homestead without Joshua Townsend, and I saw Homestead with Joshua Townsend, two different teams completely.
Yeah.
So to me, it hinges on him staying healthy, him being a factor, and how far he can carry them on this team. I mean, we saw the 6 turnovers against Northwestern, how that completely changed that game. They have playmakers. It's not just Joshua Townsend. I just think he's the catalyst that just takes that team to a whole nother level. And they're going to need it because against that Miramar defense, like you said, they're going to have to have someone back there making plays and really finding the right matchups, making the good decisions downfield against that secondary. And he's the guy that can do it. But yeah, I would give Miramar a chance to come out of this. I'm still thinking Homestead is the one that comes out on top and ends up either facing St. Thomas or maybe making it only to the state semifinals. But I wish that's the other one, the Dade Broward, I wish we could see. I wish Homestead would get there and it would seed accordingly. I'm not sure if it would happen just because Homestead's not a district champion. I don't know how far back they'd be.
I think for the reseeding, it's only through the regional finals that they do if you're not a district champion and you face
right, but I don't know. Right, but
yeah,
I don't know if there's other teams in 3M upstate in the other regions that maybe would push them down to be the 4 should they get to the Final Four.
Yeah,
and then if that happens, then they're facing St. Thomas in the semifinal in at their place instead of playing them at Drive Pink Stadium. That's what I'm hoping for. It'd be amazing if we had 2 Dade Broward matchups.
Homestead was ranked 8th overall in 3M heading into the playoffs. So
there you go. So
a couple
odds
great
are good.
But also remember, 3 of those top teams above them are in the 3M region. So you have Ely and Dillard are both ahead of them as well.
Exactly. So some will get kicked out.
There are only 4 other teams on the other 2 regional brackets that were higher than Homestead. So
not impossible.
One or two breaks go their way and they make the run. It could happen.
Yeah, it could happen. But another one that it looks like 3, maybe 4 team race in this one is Region 4M. And that's where you have Columbus. That's where you have Western. That's where you have a resurgent Palmetto team that came on strong toward the end of the season. And let's not forget Doral. They can run the football. Mark Wilder, the leading rusher in the county, one of the leading rushers overall in the state. That could be a sleeper team that could do something. If you look at the whole region as a whole, the schedule came out. It'll be Miami High getting back in the playoffs after a few years and taking on Columbus at Columbus on Friday night at 7 o'clock. Somerset Academy, this is only their second playoff appearance ever. They're going to be the ones to head down to Doral. And then we talked about the Western Cypress Bay matchup. Overall, Palmetto as well facing West Broward, which also West Broward, has been able to turn things around and get consistent and get into the postseason. But, I mean, like we said before, it looks like we kind of know who the semifinalists will be going into the season, barring any upsets here. It would create a Western, against Doral in the second round. And, of course, the rematch between Columbus and Palmetto, which, let's remind everybody, Palmetto was up 10-7 at the half in that game and hanging with Columbus. So I think both of those games will be interesting. Even now, if Western is a lot better than they've been throughout most of the season, if Doral can control things on the ground, that'll make these are 2 great matchups, I think, once we get to next week.
Yeah, I agree. And when you look through all of them, you see the strengths and weaknesses for each team. I mean, Columbus, again, going into the season and I'll just go back to the reminder, I did pick Western to go to the state championship in our preseason predictions. That was mostly because I was uncertain for me, it was coming down to quarterback play for who was going to come out from this region. Didn't really know much about Alberto Mendoza. Didn't really know too much about Palmetto's QB situation, and I knew Doral was going to be run heavy. So I went with quarterback I knew with Colin Hurst and what he's done over 3 years. Mendoza, man, he really stepped it up this year for Columbus. He's leading that offense and helped them make a big push that I wasn't sure that I thought it could happen, but I didn't know if it would happen. Seeing what he was able to do on top of Columbus's defense being as good as it's been and its run game being able to hold its own with the 1-2 punch back there. I feel like Columbus is still the favorite, which naturally is the 1 seed. You would be the favorite. But if it gets to the point where we get a Columbus-Western rematch for like we got last year, and Colin Hurst is playing the way that he has the last couple weeks, that could set up a really good matchup. But I feel like you can make almost any permutation between the top 4 seeds making the regional final. And I could look back and go, yeah, that makes sense. I could see it happening. But right now, I feel like Columbus Western getting to the regional final is probably going to be how it goes. And I'm going to have to flip my choice from the preseason. I'm going to have to say Columbus is probably going to move on.
Well, I know they've been bugging you about that behind the scenes, as Columbus fans tend to do. We love them and all of that. But, yeah, I mean, look, to back you up on this, I mean, I was there with you the first game, Western, again, you know, in the first half of that game when they lit up that team and got 33 points right out of the chute. And I think I even told you on the sideline, I'm like, I've never seen a Western team this good. I mean, and we had our questions about everybody else. So the thing was, I think it was a couple of nights later when I saw Columbus and saw what they had against that Benedictine college team that they faced in the first game. And then I heard about the reputation of that team, saw the kids they had. It was no puff team. That was a legit opponent. And then seeing that, you know, and I thought it was still a little bit of a leap, thinking, okay, maybe I'm past experience. Columbus has been there before. That's why I'm going to pick them. But I felt like my pick was validated seeing them in weeks later when they beat Tampa Jesuit, when they beat Northwestern. And then, of course, when they nearly pulled it off against Central, which was an incredible comeback in the second half. I mean, but again, not saying Western can't pull this off. I mean, it's going to be a great game if it does happen in the regional finals, but that's why we went with them. And I think still they're definitely the hands-down favorite going in. And now let's see. Obviously, it has to come through when it counts in these big, high-pressure games that are coming up in the next couple of weeks. But before we get to our picks of the week, we wanted to give a few shout-outs here to some non-football teams. We're going to start branching out more in the next few weeks, as the winter season starts up and the fall season starts to wrap up. But, shout out to a few teams that either won state championships or had memorable performances. The Belen cross-country team continued to dominate, won their 6th championship in a row. Another dominant performance up in Tallahassee at that meet. The Braddock cross-country girls team finished 2nd. Congratulations to them, Coach Alex Shaw. And the swim team also had a great performance. The first time ever, they were state runners-up as well this weekend. But one team that I definitely want to take like a minute just to highlight is the Westminster Christian volleyball team on the girls' side. We had some good volleyball teams this year. Gulliver, St. Brendan, St. Thomas Aquinas, they were all eliminated over the weekend but got pretty far. But this Westminster team, I've covered a lot of volleyball in my 20-plus years at the Herald. This team is pretty stacked, and the mix that Coach Julie Doan and the girls, for anybody that's not following, they're one win away from a perfect season. And while in volleyball that may sound like it happens often, down here it doesn't. Not in Dade County. This would be only the second time since the Sunset team, the great Sunset teams of the late 80s, 1988 actually. Coach Irene Garriga's team went 38-0. It hasn't been done since then. And the Warriors came close a couple of years ago and lost in the final. This is the 4th straight year. It's an interesting story because they're kind of like trying to avoid being the Buffalo Bills of going 4 years in a row and losing in the final. But yet you have this stacked team that hasn't lost a set since September. And the last time they did was against a team that's ranked further ahead of them in the national rankings. They're 8th in the country nationally by USA Today. It isn't just football that we have down here. That's why we call it Titletown, because here's a nationally ranked volleyball team, one win away. What a job Coach Julie done. You've covered her teams in recent years, Jordan. What do you think of just what the Warriors have been able to do?
No, I want to say business as usual just because we're used to seeing them making the runs, but it's just they found another gear this year. And with their entire team they returned a bunch of their starters from last year's, which helped with the chemistry and the camaraderie, which for volleyball, it's definitely key, especially with the setter to hitter relationship. So the fact that they've not only run the table so far, they've only dropped, I think you said, 3 sets total this year?
3 sets total and haven't lost one since September.
Yeah. That type of run is it's almost unheard of nowadays. And kudos to Julie Doan and what they've been able to do. A couple other teams or individuals I want to also shout out and give some recognition to. Back on the cross-country front, Ransom Everglades' David Serra finishes the runner-up in Class 3 or Class 2A individually. He's a junior, ran a 15:26 5K. But get this, his first year running cross-country. And he had the best time out of any runner from Dade or Broward County at states last weekend. Great job by him. And also Ashley Fitzgerald from American Heritage, state runner-up individually for the 2A girls race for the 2nd straight year. Missed the state championship by about 2 seconds. She has one more year, and I know just from talking with her last year when she won runner of the year for us last year that she was adamant before her high school career ends she's getting an individual gold. And
yeah, that one hurt when you told me on Saturday night. That one hurt. I wanted it bad for her. I was there last year in Tallahassee covering that, but hopefully she gets it before she's done.
Yeah. And then on the bowling front, high school bowling state championships were last week. Palmetto's Evan Vienner, I hope I pronounced your last name right, Evan. If not, I sincerely apologize. He finished as the top individual in the qualifying round, which is the first 4 games to determine who makes it into the team finals and gets to compete for the championship. And in one of his 4 games in there, he bowled a perfect 300, which, as someone who has tried to bowl at many different times over my career and can barely crack 100 on a good day, to see a kid like Evan being able to get 300 on one of the biggest stages for him to date, kudos to him for that, man.
And he had the tweet of the week as well, or his school did. I still remember the highest I ever had, 179, because I was so taken aback by it that I took a picture. I lost the picture since, but I was so happy. And then ever since, I've never been able to get that close. So yeah, it's not as easy as it may look to some people. Trust me, especially in that venue of competition where you're actually trying to win a championship and all of that. So congrats to Evan. A good job done by Palmetto and them this season as well. Don't forget to vote. A lot of those names that we just threw out there are in our Players of the Week polls this week for both Dade and Broward. You know where to find them, MiamiHerald.com under the high school page. Vote. It's free. You can vote as many times as you want. So vote, people out there. Don't just vote this week for the important stuff. If you have a second, vote for those if you care to see some of your favorite athletes win Players of the Week. Let's jump real quick into our last segment here, and that's our picks of the week. We'll do a little bit of a mini lightning round here. Creek and Aquinas, we mentioned it earlier. Can Creek has the defense, but can they even hang tough with Aquinas? What do you think?
I think Creek is able to stay competitive early, but Aquinas rolls away Raiders.
Yeah, I'm thinking the same thing. I think just too much depth, like we mentioned before. Now let's talk about the game. That one's at 7:00 on Friday night at Aquinas. This one, like we said before, 6:00, Traz Powell on Saturday night under the lights there, Northwestern and Gulliver. I've seen Gulliver and I've seen Northwestern. No offense to Gulliver. They've had a good year. Those seniors that are heading out, Lamont Green Jr., a beast this year. Wish him the best at FSU. But I think this is their swan song and the Bulls have too much. What do you think?
I do too. I think a fully healthy Northwestern is going to be able to take advantage of Gulliver. I think it'll be a good game, but I think Northwestern's going to be able to pull it away. Yeah,
I believe so too. And that sets up the rematch with Central more than likely. The Carroll City Booker T game is always fun. But I saw round one. And while it wasn't a total blowout, Carroll City hung in there because Carroll City's defense is decent and they are going to get better. But this is Booker T's year to make a deep run, I think, in the playoffs under Ice.
Yeah, no, I trust Ice with what he's going to do, especially this round, and then to see. And for me, I want to see what happens next week when they go back up against Norland with that rematch. So I'm going to go Booker T as well.
I'm with you on that. And here's one that we haven't talked about: Belen and Crop. And I know I covered Crop a few weeks ago, but Belen, they went 5-5, just like they actually finished the season a little bit of a sluggish finish. They lost a few games. They played Gulliver tough though. 17-7 was a loss there, and then turned around and beat LaSalle to break their losing skid right before the playoffs. Coach Don Chaney, it couldn't have started worse. They got blown out early in the season by Calvary Christian. Things were looking grim, so they've done a good job to win 5 out of 8 and make the playoffs again. But they're actually the higher seed, but they're going to have to go on the road because Crop, after that win 2 weeks ago over MacArthur, ended up getting that district title after all with points after they beat Hialeah. And I don't know, there's something about this Lightning team. They're scrappy. They run the ball. You know, they make some mistakes here and there, but I kind of like the tough attitude that Coach Tom Caporal has installed over there with the Lightning. We don't know yet where the game's going to be. It sounds like it's going to be on Thursday. I would have thought at Ives Estates, but it's being thrown around that it could end up being at Monsignor Pace or maybe at Betty Ferguson Park. So stay tuned. We'll have that at some point out there, whether either on Twitter or on MiamiHerald.com or where it is. But I'm going to go with the Lightning. I like that Team of Destiny stuff, especially when they get hot late in the season. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at Team of Destinies, I was looking at basically what I just saw with the beat I normally cover at the World Series, watching the Philadelphia Phillies make the run that they did. But unfortunately, teams of destiny, they come to an end of points. I'm going to go with Belen, mainly because, yes, they had that string of losses toward the end, but when you look at the teams they lost to, 17-7 against Gulliver, 18-7 against Homestead in the two games before beating LaSalle 16-0. For them to be able to hold their own against those two quality teams, I think that to me, I feel like gives me enough confidence to be able to say that they can take on Crop. And again, this should be a good game, but I'll take Belen to beat Crop and also to give us at least one game of different where we're going to differ here, Andre.
That's what I was thinking too. I'm like, I'm glad it's got a dull, and I mean, some are obvious and you can't help it, but yeah, it's good when we kind of have two different.
Next week's prediction should be a lot more interesting and probably more decisive.
So the Wolverines crowd can give me some crap, and then the Lightning Twitter can get on your case a little bit. It's fun.
There we go.
There you go. Well, thanks everybody for joining us. I know we had a slam-packed episode. We'll have another one next week as we dive into the 1M's first round, and we look at what we hope is going to be some pretty good doozies of games with those rematches and others as we get deeper into the postseason. But once again, I'm Andre Fernandez. He's Jordan McPherson. Thank you for joining us, everyone, and we'll see you next week.